and welcome to this week's episode of the Wire app. I'm Jahnavi and with me today I have Omar Rashid, who's a senior journalist, and Seema Chishti, editor of the Wire. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jahnavi.
To start off today's discussion, we're going a little bit off brand and we're going to ask what is happening in the Hindi film industry. Now recently, director Anurag Kashyap has announced that he is leaving Bombay and moving to a southern city that he has not disclosed. But basically he said he's doing this because the atmosphere in the Bollywood film industry is toxic, to use his words. Much of what is made is determined by OTT platforms, and according to him, that has meant that everything either looks the same or there's such a high degree of self-censorship that you can't really say anything at all. And the films that are being made are only intent upon getting commercial success. Doesn't matter if the audiences are enjoying it, there's no one taking any risks or trying to do anything interesting. Now, added to that, recently YouTuber Komal Mehta did a show in which he was talking about how this perception of success is all that really matters these days in Bollywood. It doesn't even have to be actual success. So how do you manage to get that perception? There are a variety of ways you can do it, and these booking platforms have quite a large role to play. So one of the things he mentioned was that somebody like a producer or somebody else associated with the film will do bulk bookings. So it'll look like it's a sold out show. You can say I had this many houseful shows of this film, but in fact if you go, maybe there are 5 or 10 people in the theatre. Another is that they'll give cash back on your ticket. So say the ticket is for 300, I pay 300, then I get 250 cash back. So I've actually paid only 50, but the movie can say that they collected 300 rupees from my ticket. Seema, I know this is something that you have strong feelings about, so why don't we start with you?
No, because you mentioned that we're going off-brand. I just want to say that it's like really important in India what happens to cricket and what happens in cinema, because it's such an indicator. In any society, I think any modern society, that would be the case, sport and cinema. But I think India more so, because so much of public attention, those are ways almost after elected politicians where you get tested on the fly. Every Friday, you're as good as your last movie which was released. And the same goes for cricket. You have to go there with a bat and ball and perform. And what happens? And it leads to celebs, big stars, etc. So I'm interested in what happens in cinema. The Hindi film industry, which proudly said, and I'm quoting Mr. Amitabh Bachchan here, that don't call us Bollywood because we are Hindi film cinema. You know, from the maximum number of films being made every year in the world, in Bombay, to being where there is nothing being released. So earlier it was meant to be, and it is a reflection of the dwindling buying power of the Hindi market, that people aren't going to see it in multiplex rates. So there's an element of the popcorn tax, or, excessively expensive tickets and popcorns that are not commensurate with the wages right now, with the time, with the fursat people have, or of seeing films. But there's a big creativity crisis in terms of falling tickets, etc. So I think we need to really seriously look at what's happening in Hindi cinema, and just reruns of South Indian films being made in a particular way, and the kind of films being made also of a very toxic nature. So what Anurag Kashyap, somebody like him, says it is toxic, he's absolutely right. The kind of roles you assign to people with certain names, the kind of toxic nationalism that you're putting out has just been the counter or what helped Hindi films to kind of blossom. So I think falling tickets, just no films being released, and this toxicity is like something we should sit up and really take notice, because it's really like the pulse of a nation to listen in, and of the Hindi belt, which this government says is catering so much. So it speaks to us at various levels. The one thing that Komal Mehta, which you mentioned, Jahnavi, has said, which is even more disturbing, almost like a scam in the electoral process or whatever, about producers and stars doing bulk bookings. This was always the case. Stars used to see their own movies, and we hear they used to wear burqas and come with other people to judge audience reaction and probably buy a few tickets, etc. themselves, maybe 1,000 tickets, etc. Now it appears, according to Komal Mehta, who's been watching this space for a long time, he has a long track record of being a close industry watcher. He's not just a reviewer. He understands how box office operates. This whole hunger with this kind of money that has come in to promote cinema is just a business that you're having people buy up for like crores of rupees. Millions of rupees are being spent in sending up these things, so that it gives the impression that the perception, as you said, is that this film is a big hit, the star gets great billing, and the proportion that the star gets of the movie is like way high. So you'll never have good films which may be with small budgets, like what, say, Galker Salman may do, or in Tamil Nadu with Vijay, even Vijay, who's like a very mainstream star and all, would do. They would not take such a high proportion of the film's output, so that it's impossible to produce a movie because you cannot pay your big stars. So after the demise of the Khans, apex kind of position on the ladder, you just don't have big stars replacing them. So I think this is like a big crisis, and if it's fueled by this corruption, it's really. But you've seen Rifle Club, which is Anurag Kashyap's latest film. So tell us about that.
I took the risk, and I think it was okay. I think the story was quite interesting in the way. Okay, I wouldn't like to tell the story in case you want to watch it later. But I think the execution wasn't that good. It was more of a dramatic end and more poetic in a sense. Like I would have preferred it to be more realistic. But still, I think it was different from what we see in the Hindi cinema and what Anurag Kashyap makes. He makes decent cinema here as well, but I think there it was more of an experimental movie. Coming back to the larger question, like behind the scam and the tickets, I feel it's also a reflection of the censorship that we have developed in the country in the last 10 years. Because there's no creativity coming out. People are censoring themselves. They don't want to think aloud. They don't want to think of something that may be too drastic or outrageous for the government to kind of handle. And also the people at large, I don't think the creators think they are not ready for such an idea. And that's something that may challenge their perception or their ideas. So I feel that could also be an underlying factor because I think they all play into each other.
And I think one of the areas in which this lack of creativity is, or lack of new things coming from the industry, is extremely visible. If you just look at the listings at any movie theatre, there'll be maybe one or two Hindi movies that most people wouldn't have heard of, then movies in Tamil, Telugu, other Malayalam, other languages, and then old Bollywood movies from 10, 15 years ago, some even longer than that, repeating and playing. And what you said about, I think, censorship is something that I think most directors now definitely have in mind. Kashyap himself, his make of Suketu Mehta's Maximum City, Netflix has decided not to air. So there is definitely that.
And Anurag Kashyap is very angry about where Kennedy is. That has not been released. Someone else's film was just released without Timanshu Dhulia's film. I forget whose. It had Pariniti Chopra. It was just released without allowing them for pre-publicity, because even OTTs, and OTTs are run by just two, there's a duopoly there as well, that they are so scared of. So it's just a common, the really lowest of the low. And what's really surprising is that even these comedians like Samay Raina and all, they have bigger star billing than these big stars. So the big stars want these comedians on their shows. So Kapil Sharma is a factor here. These comedians who are not highly rated, a critic would not rate them very highly, are popular. They're bringing more people to see them through their platforms than the stars are. So I think that this kind of, the disappearance of the celebrity element, just the big actor, is no Dilip Kumar, no Raj Kapoor, no Shah Rukh Khan, should give us pause.
I think there's also a falling level of, you could say, quality, if we can describe it. Like not many films would be rated highly across the globe right now, if we talk about the Indian cinema. But on the other hand, when we look at the cinema in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and also Maharashtra, like the regional Marathi cinema, they do produce movies that are intriguing, engaging, and also make us think about. They reveal things to us that we know happens in a society, but we don't really understand on a day-to-day basis. But I think the Hindi cinema is quite doing the opposite. They take a serious issue and they dilute it, try to make it into a propaganda spoof, and so the mystery and you could say the holy nature of that issue, for example, Kashmir or 370 or Kerala story, JNU. These are all very serious issues, and they take it and they dilute it into a very funny propaganda movie. Yeah. It's not even a cartoon. Like at least a cartoon has some seriousness to it. It's blatantly funny. So I think these two things are happening at the same time, because there are so many movies that, like, I love the cinema in the South. They take really serious issues and they give them the treatment that's required. Like maybe it's on police, maybe it's on elections. We don't have many movies on elections in the North. If we have one series, people go gaga over it because it's so rare. But in the South, I think every other movie has some political undertone and there is some reflection of the netas or the...
And there's also state funding for these organic, well-crafted pieces of work and stories being told, which is not the case here. So if you look at even Manthan and all the golden period of art house cinema or different cinema or small cinema, which could not be like really big scale, it did get state funding and it got state support. That's there in Kerala. That is there to some degree in Tamil Nadu. That's not available. I don't think, I can't see. They've even done away with the archives, and so all kinds of things happening. And I think cinema is, Hindi cinema, the demise of Hindi cinema is telling that story, sadly.
And the opposite is true in the northern states, like especially I think there's a new trend coming up in BJP ruled states where they make such movies tax-free.
Yes.
The movies that suit their political agenda. And
But
otherwise...
they still don't take off.
Yeah, that's the funny part.
Yeah, that's been happening since Uri,
Yeah.
I think. And yeah.
But they don't intervene when an actually good movie is out, which might bring acclaim to the country or
I
to
mean,
the
like
state.
All That We Imagine Is Light, which really got written about so much last year, is a film that the French had to pay for. So it just tells you about what's happening. And she's Payal Kapadia, you would not recognize while she's here. She did a film on Jamia, she's done other stuff, but she was sitting on actually a strike outside the NFDC of the national... I beg your pardon, the Film Institute. Yeah. The Film Institute strike, which she was like a part of, to try and just get some good sense in governance there.
Okay, moving on from this, one of the other things I wanted to talk about today was what's been happening in Sambhal. This region in Uttar Pradesh has been the site of communally charged tensions for the last few months, and this week has been no different. So the DSP of the Sambhal Kotwali police station, Anuj Chaudhary, has come out to say that Muslims who do not want to get color on them on Holi should just stay at home. So it's a Friday, they should not go out to offer Friday prayers during the month of Ramzan if they are so opposed to getting a little color on themselves. This obviously created controversy, and then Chief Minister Adityanath decided to reiterate his statements and add to it, saying that there are 52 Fridays in the year, which is also, Chaudhary had also said there are 52 Fridays in the year, but Holi comes only once, so why can't people delay it a little bit or offer namaz at home? And these remarks seem to have given BJP leaders in the state sort of a free hand to say whatever they want, because more recently there's a minister, Raghuraj Singh, who said that if Muslim men don't want to get holy color on them, then they should go out with tarpaulin around their bodies. Now the context here is important because the Shahi Jama Masjid in Sambhal is one of the Mughal era mosques that the Hindutva right has decided was built on a demolished temple. And in November, a local court ordered a survey of the mosque, and within a day the local administration was all too keen to comply. And then on the second day of the survey, there were protests by the Muslims of the area, and the police retaliated. There was violence. 5 Muslim men were killed. The police claimed that they didn't shoot at anyone and that the protesters were killed in crossfire, but they can't answer the question of why protesters would shoot at each other in a situation like this. More recently, the mosque wanted to carry out some basic repairs like whitewashing before the month of Ramzan started, but the ASI did not grant permission. They had to go to court, and finally today the court has asked the ASI to whitewash the front of the mosque and add some lights outside. Omar, I wanted you to start on this. You've reported extensively about this for The Wire. Where do things stand in Sambhal today? And are the DSP and Chief Minister's remarks sort of an attempt to keep things on the boil?
Yes, of course. Definitely it's an attempt to keep Sambhal in the news, and they find new ways to keep it relevant for the people. They dig up temples, they dig up wells, they renovate things, they find archaeological artifacts. I think if you roll back the question of the mosque being repaired, there's I think the question is about the ASI's role here more than the government. So I'll just like to state some facts out so that the viewer understands what's actually happening. So every year before Ramzan starts, the mosque committee, the management, they undertake the whitewash of the entire mosque. So it's like a cleaning process, but there's no repair because they cannot repair without the permission of the ASI. So this year, the ASI did not allow them. They sought permission from the administration, but the administration did not let them go ahead. So they went to the court, and the court sought a reply from the ASI, asking कि आप क्यों नहीं करने दे रहे हैं, like what is your objection to it. So the ASI did not address that question. They did not respond why they cannot whitewash, but they gave their own you could say own theory that there are patches that need work, but then it doesn't need any whitewash, and it doesn't need any interference right now. There is no intervention required. But today is the 12th, and I think 1/3 of Ramzan is already over, and it took them more than 10 days to address this question, although this had been going on from I think February 23. So there is a clear-cut delaying tactic, of course. They want to bully, oppress. It's like tormenting somebody. You want to give it, but then after a lot of torment, you want to torture them. You want to make them beg, literally. So that's at play. But the larger, deeper issue, I think, is to also take the autonomy of the management of the mosque from the Muslim community and give it to the ASI, which has been seeking it recently. They didn't do it in the last 100 years, but then recently they have got very interested, because in the last 100 years, they never intervened in the whitewash. They never intervened in any kind of management in the mosque. And there was a contract signed in 1927 between the mosque committee and the rulers of India at the time. There was the British government, so they had a secretary who signed the contract. So I think there are things that are happening which are ominous and which will unfold in ways we don't know yet. But as of now, the court's order is, I think, is welcome as of now, because it at least gives them some semblance of normalcy for the next 20 days left, I think. So yeah, so I don't think it's something that should have been stretched like for so long. Because it was a normal procedure, and whitewashing of the structure would not erase any so-called imagined Hindu images which the other petitioners have been claiming. That was their objection.
And it's not anything new.
It's not a new procedure, and it's not like there's a word. There's actually a phrase in UP which the administration always uses कि कोई नई प्रथा नहीं चलने देंगे. There's been no tradition, no new tradition that will start. That is the most common reason given to, like, curb any kind of rally, any kind of festival, any kind of protest. They don't want to allow any new tradition. So there's nothing like that here. So there's no reason for it.
Seema, you brought up previously that Sambhal is quite close to Delhi. So all of this, while it's happening in UP, it also does have a part to play on the national stage. These remarks about Holi and who should or shouldn't go out, how they should do it, what they are able to do, and these are not new in a way in today's India, and we've seen demeaning remarks of this kind being made repeatedly over the last several years. So at the national scale, what do you think? What is Sambhal?
So I think that to look at it in this larger context, as all the details that Omar has been bringing to the wire and which he spoke of now, I see it as part of a cascading kind of a trend which takes it way many notches over and above what's happening in Ayodhya and Banaras, etc. Because from Ayodhya and Banaras, you move to Rampur, where you kind of politically emasculate people, and then you move on to Sambhal. So the interesting thing is that there is a escalating Muslim demography, if you like, in these places. So earlier it was thought that you can, there are areas where there was a sense of, even when the BJP would do its evaluation, that, that's like, there are lots of Muslims there, so Malappuram or Sambhal we don't look at. To be able to go there and to be able to ensure dominance there is part of a much larger kind of a play. To talk about it as it will be the theatre of where the 10th avatar of Lord Vishnu will come is also very significant, because it is not time bound. You don't have to establish anything historically at all there. So to do that, and Mr. Modi inaugurates the temple a few days after he inaugurated Ayodhya, etc. He does all that. So I think to do that is to strip away from Muslims in UP and in India a sense that you can be Muslim and an Indian together. So you can just be, because the Constitution of India allows Muslims in equal stature. It allows Christians, Sikhs, atheists, agnostics, everybody equal play. But you destroy that by taking away your Muslimness. You cannot read the namaz. You cannot do simple things like whitewash a mosque. Why would it be such a big deal? No invention of tradition happening here. You cannot wear a burqa. You cannot even read the namaz in. Why should you even read the namaz in February? Even 12 or 15 years ago, this kind of a comment would not have been possible to have been imagined. This is the Sadhvi Ritambara level of comments that the Chief Minister of UP sets the tone, and then this kind of follows in a rush. It almost seems, like a friend of mine suggested the other day, it almost seems as if revenge for the 240 seats, and particularly the BJP coming number 2 in UP, is being extracted from those who they think ensured that they lost. So what happened in Milkipur, etc. as well, in those areas, and now in Sambhal. So I think this is to destroy the self-confidence, the belief, and a fundamental tenet of the Indian constitution, which is part of the whole business of establishing a Hindutva state in India. And Sambhal is a very important and unfortunate part in that piece of that jigsaw.
Yeah, of course. I think Sambhal is also symbolic of the new pattern of oppression, because like she mentioned, Kashi, Banaras and Ayodhya, they are the old Hindutva, where they want to reclaim something that they believed was unfairly taken away. And there was some amount of public consciousness built about it, that Krishna, Ram and because of Shivji's abode. But Sambhal, Kalki, I'm sure most Hindus don't worship Kalki, and there's no, you could say, the same levels of reverence is not present in the society. So they want to force gods into the culture. And it's not the only temple that's believed to be the birthplace of Kalki, because Modi himself inaugurated one. And there are other temples already existing there which also claim, this was the same same model in Ayodhya. There's so many Ram temples before the actual Ram temple was built. So I think it's also a new pattern where they use the law, and the judiciary doesn't really stand up to the law that it should be. It just needs to impose the law that is on paper, that you cannot entertain any such plea asking for any kind of restorative.
It goes against the places.
Like real or imagined. Even if a temple was demolished to build a mosque or vice versa, there are laws which say that you can't open that door again. It's done. You move on. You think about the future, and if you want a temple, you build a new one. I'm sure the Muslims are not opposing a new Kalki temple in Sambhal next to the mosque. They're not opposing that. It's not their say. And coming back to the Holi comment, I think even there's a similar pattern. The DSP and Yogi Adityanath and the other BJP leaders, they are all trying to project that the Muslims are opposed to Holi, and that's why they should not come out, because they are opposed. But I have not heard a single statement from the Muslim clergy or the common Muslim population saying that we have some issue with the Holi. They have not demanded Holi to be postponed or shifted. So they are actually placing the scarecrow in the field and then going and beating it with their...
Creating a duality when none exists.
It's a straw man argument.
Yeah. So they are manufacturing the entire debate, they are providing answers, and they are also crucifying whoever they want. And the Muslim side, on the other hand, so far has not been provoked, and it's unlikely that they will take the provocation, given how the state functions. But there is a clear-cut attempt to provoke them. Even just I think 2 days ago or yesterday, BJP MLA Ketki Singh, she was also addressing the same question about Holi and the imagined problems that Muslims have with Holi. So she went on to say that if you are so adverse to coexisting with Hindus, then why don't you also have your own wing in the hospital? Own wing. Thankfully, she's not gone to a separate hospital, which I don't think will be a bad thing, given the shortage that our country has. But that indicates to a pattern where they feel free to comment on it. And she also went on to say that she will reach out to Yogi Adityanath to request him to take it forward.
And I think even the Chief Minister of Maharashtra said something like, we'll tear up the pages from history or something. Itihas ke panne phar denge or something like that. With respect to Aurangzeb, that you will kind of take away the grave and you need to dig him up. So I think there are pretty desperate kind of statements being made, of course, akin to their ideological position. But them coming fast and furious suggests that there is some sort of, a political need is being whipped up and then met, being created, because the economy is tanking. Unemployment is way up, manufacturing is down, there's no way you're not emerging as a China plus one. The 10 years that you have spent chasing bigotry, China has spent getting to deep seek. So I think the distance between yourself and this imagined Vishwaguru thing is so wide, and FDI is out, your stock market, which Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah were urging all Indians to invest in 2 days before the results came in, are also tanking, which they watch very closely. Then, what else are you left with? You're just left with all this, because that's what your core actually is about, and you at least shore up the core if you don't kind of enlarge your base.
Is there band-aid? Because they don't know any other remedy.
Yeah, and also I think it's also their default mode. You just go into that fetal position.
It's like them going into a shell. And I also feel that because they have raised such issues like the temple, and in the last like how many months to the Lok Sabha election? It's been like 10 months, close to that. We haven't really had a discussion on jobs or employment.
Nothing. Despite
or
promises made in July in the
Yeah.
budget by the government that they will PLI must be employment linked investment, etc. There's been zero happening there, and only some hokey-pokey statistics where we now believe that the GDP earlier is 9.2%. So it's just there's no word on the census.
That doesn't impact the common person on a day-to-day basis. Like, how does it matter?
And also I think there's a piece by our political editor Ajoy Ashirwad today about the factionalism within the BJP. That's something that flies under the radar because there's not too much reporting happening on it. But at the state level, the kind of organizational cohesion that they need in order to be able to elect a new president is not happening. So I think these kind of issues ensure that everybody then just comes on board, or at least you create so much noise over it that nobody realizes that the BJP has been unable to complete more than 12 of their elections, and that too in the smaller states. Rajasthan is the only big state where they've been able to conduct a proper organizational poll and head for and choose their own party president.
Speaking more about what's been happening at the national level, Parliament has been on, and it's seen quite heated discussions and arguments and disagreements between the union government and the opposition over the last week. One of the issues that has created controversy is not a new one. It's the National Education Policy of 2020, but it is back in the news again and back in their discussions because of something Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said while responding to a DMK MP from Tamil Nadu. He accused the Tamil Nadu government of trying to ruin the futures of children in the state and also being undemocratic and uncivilized. The minister in question, T. Sumathi, had brought up how rupees 2,000 crore meant for Tamil Nadu schools had been diverted because the state was against the NEP. Now, obviously, Pradhan's statements did not go down well with the DMK or even other opposition parties, and this has led to several debates across the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And one of the other issues that's been a big issue of big debate has been around the alleged discrepancies in voter lists and EPIC cards, which are the electoral cards. Again, in both houses of parliament, leaders have brought this up and said that this is a question that's being raised across the country, and even though it is the election commission, not the union government, that makes these lists, it deserves to be addressed because it matters to the people. And perhaps as a response to this, the EC has invited leaders of all political parties to come and discuss the electoral process. Seema, perhaps we can start with the NEP issue. Now, in several ways during its time at the centre, the BJP has been accused of trying to dilute India's federal structure, and this is just one of those ways. So what are your thoughts on what we've seen in Parliament?
I think it's really unwise of the BJP to raise this deeply contentious issue. Clearly it's being done with a way that we'll at least plant the flag and try and push the Overton window just a little bit, because this opposition to Hindi they see as a centerpiece of the rejection of the Hindutva ideology. Because this Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan is like a the trifecta, if you like, which kind of moves together. And Tamil Nadu, by rejecting the whole Hindi thing, they think the other two pieces won't hang. Because Hindi is actually also code and short form for accepting that the language of the Hindi belt will be spoken there. Tamil Nadu takes great pride in its civilizational distinctness. So it's kind of agitation for Tamil, for it's also not even anti-Hindi because they're just talking about deep pride in Tamil. See, they say don't call it a regional language. It's a highly ancient, rich, old, it's a national language and it is one of the 22 national languages. But that is sought to be painted as an anti-Hindi drive because the Hindi walas have been pushing it on them. And there's a history to it, as we all know. And this was particularly inflamed in 1965 when the Indian government had to withdraw its earlier decisions. It was a constitutional provision to allow for like everything to happen in Hindi, assuming that the first 15 years of the constitution would allow everybody to be speaking Hindi, which the Hindi walas had managed to push in the constitution. But that was, the government then had to like go back on that, and because of deep agitations down south. So I think that's a way of trafficking in the Hindutva cause and hoping that you can cause a kind of an urge for a Brahminical ideology that will follow once you accept Hindi. But I think the arguments of Tamil Nadu are very strong. They are very cold. A lot of them are very cold-blooded economic arguments and federal arguments that you cannot tie aid to this pushing of the three-language formula, and very rightly so put by the former Home Minister and Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, that how many people in the north are speaking three languages? They're barely speaking two languages, maybe one. So don't come and tell Tamil Nadu how to teach its students in its public schools, etc. And they're not saying that Hindi is banned in private schools. They say we don't have the infrastructure and young children don't have the bandwidth of doing more than two languages in the public schools, and we'll teach that mother tongue plus Tamil, and those who want to learn Hindi can do it outside. But I think this whole drive is a way of trying to enhance a political, ideological and societal fingerprint or footprint, if you like, for the BJP.
Omar, I wanted to ask you about the discussion around discrepancies in the voter list. You've covered a large number of elections. Do you see these? What do you make of these allegations around the discrepancies? Are these concerns legitimate?
Of course they are. I think we have seen enough elections to have doubts in our minds that it's not always that there's something wrong. We don't know how it's happening, what's happening. If the voter lists are not made in a proper way, if they are not verified, are there bogus voters or are there bogus names on the list? Or are there double names, or are there deletions? We don't know how it's working, but there is something that's not foolproof. And each time there's a new problem that emerges. Like in every election, we have seen there is a new modus operandi of the alleged modus operandi of how the elections are being rigged in a way. So I think the Election Commission should have intervened much earlier, because these questions are not really not something we have discovered now. Like the opposition parties have been raising it for, I think,
after each election.
Yeah, every election, even a bypoll, even a small bypoll, like for example Rampur, Sambhal, there have been clear-cut cases. Even in the recent elections in UP, we saw that there were allegations that the election of the booth officials, that they were allegedly receiving calls from the BJP office and they had to fill their so-called quota of fake votes, which may be true, may not be true, we cannot know. But there has to be a probe. But the Election Commission just rejected those claims because if true, they're very serious. And even if out of 100, one is true, that still raises a question that there is a hole somewhere from where all the corruption is seeping into the system. So that, I think, like personally, I do have a doubt that there are mechanisms at play which we probably cannot prove, but it's not as fair and transparent like it should be. And the opposition always pays the cost because the machinery is with the state and
quite literally so, yeah. No, I think it's like I said it. I think it hangs, Jahnavi, on the fact that the election process of how you choose the ECs, that has been so blatantly violated by the executive within a year. So you have several election commissioners who've been nominated, who've been chosen rather, in violation of what the Supreme Court is saying just less than a year before that nomination is to happen. So I think trust, institutional trust is very low. So even as people don't know what's wrong, and there's been like rude letters by Mr. Rajiv Kumar to the opposition leaders, such rude letters, short of name calling, everything was done. So as opposed to opening out,
and even while he was
Yes, even when he was resigning, these kind of, this political kind of sloganeering happening almost by the outgoing chief election commissioner. I think both these things, the absolute behavior of the election commission, also they're being completely non-transparent. Why aren't you telling us how many votes have been cast soon enough? That's the one thing the machine tells you. It's like a calculator. How many votes have been cast? Just add it up and tell people that. Tell them the next day, the next morning. So that not happening, plus in the way the election commissioners are being chosen and people being kept out of that collegium which is meant to choose, that the selection committee that is meant to choose them, keeping the opposition out of that is sort of, a midnight appointment of the latest kind of commissioner is filling nobody with any. So even if there is no proof on kind of wrongdoing, etc., all this just fills your mind with grave doubts about how deep the democratic backslide is.
Yeah, I think what's concerning for a voter, and what I've found while talking to the common voter, they always believe, although they may be wrong, maybe their political choice was in the minority in that seat and maybe they lost in a legitimate manner. If you go and ask them कि आपके साथ क्या हुआ, आपकी party हार गई, their reply is not that that party did well. They always say that party cheated, the ruling party cheated. And I would be like, oh how, उन्होंने क्या किया, वो हमने इसको वोट डाला, वो उसमें चला गया. So that has become like a standard reply from the voter, and these are not motivated people who are towing the line of a party or some ideological thing. There is a doubt that is building up, and I think because of social media and WhatsApp, there are lots of incidents where people do watch, even if the mainstream media doesn't report it, it's going on Instagram and YouTube, and people do build perceptions. Like a man came on record during a recent election and he claimed that he cast 6 votes. Later on, there was hue and cry, and then he claimed that 6 members of his family cast different votes. But by the time the first video came out, there is a perception building that there's no smoke without fire, right?
Yeah. And also, as far as video goes, I think the Chandigarh mayoral polls was a great kind of a marker, because on video it established how for a small mayoral election there's been so much of dhandlebazi, there's been so much of cheating, and that kind of really just, that is almost like, if there's to be like an emblem of what's happening, it is probably Mr. Anil Masih's face as he's looking up to the CCTV and he's making those changes. And then the election commission goes and disallows the use of allowing for CCTV footage to be made available on demand. They actually went out and changed the law. So it certainly doesn't fill me with great trust and hope.
The last thing I wanted us to talk about is 2 rather interesting deals that have been inked in the last 2 days, both with Elon Musk's Starlink satellite that he wants to bring to India. One was with Bharti Airtel and the other with Reliance Jio. Now, these deals are contingent on Starlink actually being given authorization by the government. Telecom is very highly regulated in India, and there have been potential security concerns about introducing satellite telecom of this sort. Now, earlier this year, there were reports of Starlink devices being used in Manipur, coming perhaps from across the border in Myanmar, because there was this very long internet blockade in the state after the ethnic conflict began in May 2023, but that would have been done illegally. Now, Musk's Starlink has also been facing resistance from Mukesh Ambani and Reliance, but perhaps this resistance was nullified after Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Musk last month in the US. Ambani also wanted that the spectrum for home satellite broadband be auctioned rather than allocated by the government, but the government has not done that and stayed with the allocation program. Now, some questions and concerns have been raised about the way things seem to be happening here. Like industry from abroad, in fact, is taking the first step, and it seems like government permissions are going to follow soon after. So the way is being led by what makes commercial sense for Elon Musk and for Starlink, and especially in a situation where there have been potential defense and national security risks that have been raised. Seema, what do you make of the way this is happening?
I think it's the direct connection between how India wants to suck up to Trump and please him. Elon Musk being seen as Mr. Trump's absolute buddy. It's called the Musk-Trump. It's a hyphenated US presidency is being run. So this is just, it's completely astounding. Musk stood up Mr. Modi. He didn't turn up when Mr. Modi wanted him for photo ops after Bill Gates. He was slated to visit, and for some reason he didn't turn up. Tesla is not exactly producing cars. Its shares are tanking. Its sales are down. He desperately needs anything that can give him oomph, which can give him like control, presence, and kind of drive here. And he, so I think here they've actually been told to go and sign up because it is something that's going to please Musk and please Trump no end. So I don't know if there's and this will we look at once we know Mr. Piyush Goyal is rushing again to please Mr. Trump with some other thing. But the way India has been conducting itself with America has been, I mean, far from this ghus ke marenge. If you're going to behave like this with the big people, if you're going to behave like this with Donald Trump, I mean, like, what's going on?
Yeah, Trump has said so much about retaliatory tariffs, and India has basically been
so smaller countries, Colombia, have kind of sent back those planes. The way we behave with the shackling, the way we've behaved with Trump now, which we're going to behave, and especially if they're going to open up the agriculture markets, etc., and drugs, I see it as part of that. And I don't see it as like I may want to rubbish my own theory as a conspiracy theory that surely it couldn't be so bad. But just look at the way it's kind of stacking up. Somebody stood up, a prime minister, who actually met you with his whole family in this really odd setting. We saw those photographs with Mr. Musk and his friend from office, his nanny, his children sitting here, and their counterparts were Mr. Doval and Mr. Jaishankar and all. Absurd situation. It's an insult to India. And we go there and we sign away our airwaves. What's going on here?
The biggest telecom providers are getting instructions to go.
Correct. And also, and do we think that they do anything without instructions with Geo, and they dare do that? And then something like this with telecom. And if we just compare what's happening now with the other kind of heightened sense of self-risk that the government has, they can actually expel people for having a satellite phone. We know that some journalists and all who are here on satellite phones can be just jailed forever, that you're a spy and all that. In that security framing that you put for yourself, you just allow this. So if it goes through just like this, I think India really needs to sit up, and I just hope we don't end up being the 51st state, because Canada has said it doesn't want to be. They've been very open and cold. I don't see any kind of, we could be outsourced overseas. We do outsource well. So I don't see, so it's like really scary, and it doesn't speak well of our diplomatic way of doing things and of our positioning as a big country, as a proud civilizational big nation.
And incidentally, I think just before this deal was struck, the Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim, who was one of the richest man, I think now he's 16, but he was the richest man, I think 10, 20 years back. So he cancelled a deal with Musk on the Starlink contract because Musk retweeted something which made Slim appear like a drug mafia sympathizer or a member. So he linked him, and I think within 2-3 days he cancelled a big multi-billion dollar deal, and a few days later he comes to India with this. So I do think, okay, I'm not well versed with the contract dealings and how it works, but I'm sure there is a link, like him
it's
losing
Starlink.
There's a Starlink, him losing a big deal and then coming to a big country, and unopposed, there's no discussion.
And actually Trump Musk has been very, very careful about how he deals with India, because he's got serious economic ties with China. So he's constantly balancing off all of that. So while a company like Apple has cast its lot, vaguely with India too, but not Musk. So we need to really kind of watch this space, and for India to have, and all the Hindutva trolls, the right-wing trolls, were delighted when Trump was sworn in, because they thought they were sticking it in the eye to all the others. And now hopefully they've calmed down. So MIGA has kind of, so ab ki baar Trump Sarkar is not doing too well for the present Indian government. And we'd like them to show more spine and to be closer to their rhetoric here than they are being now.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching.